In this video, I am going to talk to you about my experiences with the SVS Ultra Evolution Titan speakers that you can see there behind me. And straight away, I love that name. I think Titan's a great name for a pair of hi-fi speakers. And these are pretty cool speakers, pushing some modern boundaries at their price point. I love that. But at the same time, they've got some really quite old-fashioned things about them as well. It's a real quandary of a speaker. So we have a huge amount to cover here, so let's crack on. SVS's Ultra Evolution range marks their move into a more premium, a more high-end and a more expensive area of the hi-fi speaker market. And the Titans in the UK cost just under £5,000 for the pair. And I think you guys over in the US can buy them individually for just under $2,000 each speaker. So for me, these are not what I would call crazy expensive, but they're definitely premium. So because they're premium, my expectation definitely goes up, and so does what the competition is doing at this price level. And you are getting a lot of speaker here for the money with the Titans in terms of drivers. 7 drivers per speaker, which is a lot. And there is an almost curved cabinet construction, which is very cleverly designed because it's not actually curved, but it gives the impression that it is. So kudos to SVS for the design. However, I think all of that does come with some compromises, and I want to get the compromises out of the way straight away because I think for most people they will be seen as minor compromises, but I still think they are very important to mention. The first compromise for me is with the speaker cable terminals. Their build quality is just fine, but the recessed into the back of the speaker approach, I've always hated that design, and it feels super old-fashioned as most speakers in this price range have bespoke design terminals that are not recessed, such as the KEF R11 Meta that are similar priced speakers that I have here too. I much prefer how KEF have designed their speaker cable terminals because it just feels more modern. And again, it's not necessarily a quality thing, it's just a feel, it's just the look. And it makes this part of the Titans feel a little bit overlooked. And that leads me on to my second quibble really, is with the included spikes. The spikes that come with the Titans are the same spikes that we see with lots of more affordable or more budget or more entry-level hi-fi products. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with those spikes, of course. But when speakers get up to a more premium price level, we often see some kind of bespoke design going on, just like we see with the KEF R11 Meta and many other speakers that I've looked at around this price point. So again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the spikes that are included with the Titans, but this just feels like a bit of an overlooked part of the design. It just makes them feel a little bit less special. Then next for me is the looks of the Titan, which I really don't mind. I definitely appreciate the almost curve of the cabinet, of course, because that is very standout, and I like the front chamfered baffle, especially at the top of the speaker, because of how that makes the really quite chunky speaker look slimmer. But apart from that, this is just a very plain looking speaker with minimal to no character to it, really. Of course, if the Titans were finished in black and this was in a darker type of cinema room, none of this is going to matter. But finished in white, if we're talking about them being placed in quite a modern, nicely designed, nicely decorated room, which of course I don't really have, I just think, are the Titans nice enough looking? You have to ask that question in this seat. Like I said, I really don't mind their look, but it just doesn't really excite me. It's just very plain, it's very simple, it's very minimalist, but maybe just not very exciting. I think the point gets proved when you put one next to a KEF R11 Meta, because the KEF make the SVS look a little like a hunched over old man. And the KEF definitely win out with their styling, they have more visual presence about them, and they definitely are the more stylish of the two. And it's very telling to me just how bland the SVS are, because when you put the grills on them, I think the speakers look better in some ways, because the grills add a little bit of character to them. And I think I've probably overdone this point by now. I think we can agree that the Titans are not the best looking speakers around this price point. It is what it is. But they might be some of the most ambitious speakers around this price point, because to the best of my knowledge, these are the only speakers that I can think of around this type of price point that feature a diamond tweeter. And when you mention diamond tweeter, I think most of you will probably think of Bowers & Wilkins 800 range of speakers and think their 805 stand mount starts at around, I think, £8,500 here in the UK, starts there. And when I think of diamond tweeters, I actually think of Martin's Parker Duo diamond speakers that are absolutely superb, but I think they start at around £20,000. So just think about that for a second. We're getting a diamond tweeter here in the Ultra Evolution range. I'm not sure what the lowest price point is, but to get a diamond tweeter in a 5K floor standing speaker, that's something I never thought we would ever see. However, I'm not saying that SVS are using the same tweeter as Bowers or Martin. I think it's very unlikely, but it's still made using a very similar, if not the same process, by adding a synthetic layer of grown diamond to a substrate, which in this instance is an aluminium dome. And SVS say the diamond vastly improves the rigidity and acoustic properties of the dome. Either way, call me impressed by the ambition here. I think most audiophiles will be interested to know that this diamond tweeter sounds nothing like a Bowers & Wilkins diamond tweeter. It actually sounds more soft dome tweeter like to me, which is really interesting, but that's actually how diamond is supposed to sound. Clean, clear, smooth, detailed, but a little bit softer and a little bit more forgiving, which I found interesting because I was actually expecting this tweeter to sound a bit more lively and a bit more pizzazzy, maybe a bit more home cinema speaker like, but it's really not actually. I would say it's a very refined sounding treble, slightly easygoing, slightly softer, not lacking in any way, but a bit more soft and easygoing. So that's really quite an interesting one, and it means if you like a more attacking, zingy attacking treble, these might not be the speakers for you. The next thing that impressed me is the use of 4 6.5-inch bass drivers in what SVS call a force balanced array, which is basically dual opposing bass drivers, so 2 bass drivers on the front and 2 on the rear of the speaker, directly opposite each other. And they work by balancing out the back pressures of each driver for less resonance or mechanical energy going into the cabinet. And this is nothing new. We've seen dual opposed drivers be used in subwoofers for many years. And off the top of my head, I can maybe only think of 1 or 2 speakers that use a dual opposed bass array. And those are mostly more expensive, a lot more expensive in the instance of something like the Clef Blades, much more expensive than these. But apart from the Clef Blades, I can't think of many others, and I definitely haven't reviewed any speakers in the 7+ years I've run this channel that have like this dual opposed bass array in the speaker design. And it makes me question why not? Because it seems like an obvious choice to go with speakers. It seems like there would be obvious benefits to it. And it's also no surprise to me really that an SVS speaker or a product from SVS can deliver a lot of really fantastic bass. And I don't just mean deep bass, I mean all bass, from the upper bass right down, with the exception of the very deepest of bass notes. The spec sheet says 27 Hz at -3 dB, which is very impressive to me. That's 12-inch smaller sealed subwoofer type bass output from the speakers, which is very impressive. And listening to them, I would have said their usable, good quality, usable output would be down to around 30 Hz, which is very impressive for speakers because some speakers say or claim more than that, but actually when you listen to them, it doesn't sound like it. These sound like they've got good usable output down to around 30 Hz. Very impressive. But the deep bass is not really what I care about. I care about 40 Hz and up because that's where 90% of our bass detail lives, especially with music, but movies is the same. And what I like about the Titan is they deliver a nice balance between a really good amount of bass, but that bass has quality to it, detail, speed, articulation, quality, the balance of the two. And interestingly, the Titans do a bit of what I call like the double bass effect, where they give you that detail and that speed and articulation, the information, but they also give you bass that wraps around you. So it kind of hits the room and fill the room and wrap around you with the bass. That's what I'm always looking for because it just adds that extra level of foundation. And that means that the Titans to me seem like they are a speaker and a subwoofer all in one. which you can see from the specification. So I think most people, including me, and I'm pretty much a bass head, would be happy using the Titans without a subwoofer. However, I definitely still would use them with subwoofers, purely so that you can add a bit more very low end pressure bounce type of vibe. You know, just maybe 40 hertz and down, just add a bit more in that region just to balance and uplift everything. But like, that's, yeah, taking the system to the nth level, even without subwoofers. And I've listened to them only without subwoofers. For bass, the Titans are very, very impressive. So I'm a happy audiophile. It's excellent bass. However, it is still SVS bass, which I always find to be just a little thick and a little throbby, which I really don't mind, but it's definitely a point of distinction with other speakers where their bass is a little more nimble and fast, even if it's not as room warming or as heavy hitting or as wrap around you. And I'm thinking of definitely the Wharfedale Elysian 3 that are similar priced, and in some regards also the Revival Audio Atalante 4, both that I've had here recently. However, in a direct comparison with the KEF R11 Meta, there is no comparison. The SVS deliver substantially more bass, more room hitting and room filling, and it's much more to my taste. However, if you're going to be placing the Titans very close to corners of the room or up against the wall like SVS actually show on the website, well then you're going to get even more bass out of them, which could be a good thing, but it's definitely something to think about. I always test this by where does the speaker sound best in this listening room. I have a blue masking tape T on the floor, and if the speaker ends up right on the junction of that T, well then it's delivering the right amount of bass for me in this room, and that is where the Titans were, right on the junction of the T, so they delivered the perfect amount of bass for me, for my taste, in this small but very acoustically treated listening room. And it's always the bass that gets me first, or maybe it doesn't, but when it does, it stands out to me. And the reason why the Titans bass stood out is because it was not a one-trick pony. It could do it all. It could do big heavyweight jazz fast bass, really fast, but at the same time change the music, and it can do big heavyweight drum and bass. It can do both. And yes, maybe it's a touch on the heavier side, so maybe it's slightly better suited to modern music, but that's mostly the music I listen to anyway. So that balance of bass I am good with. Speaking of balance, I'm also a fan of how the mid-range and vocal regions from the Titans are delivered. It's very similar to the treble in that it's a little bit more forgiving and a little bit more easygoing, but I really don't mind that. And this is where the design of the Titan stands out. Rather than a lean back design we see with a lot of speakers, which is intended to time align the tweeter with the mids and bass, the Titan leans forward around the tweeter. So the dual 4.5-inch mid-range drivers time align with the diamond tweeter and the bass drivers. And this is a very interesting way to do it that we don't see very often. I think Focal do something similar with their higher end speakers, but I don't remember seeing this type of design with speakers around this price point. Again, I'm sure someone will take great pride in correcting me if I'm wrong there. But the vocal delivery is another key area for the speaker sound, and it's one that's very, very different to the KEF R11 Meta. The Titan I find to have quite an old-fashioned sounding mid-range and vocal delivery. That, as I mentioned, is a little reserved, that is quite easygoing and quite mellow. But it's not slow, it's not sluggish or lacking in detail, but it's more of a you go to the vocals or to the small details kind of sound, which feels more old-fashioned to me, but I really don't mind it at all. In fact, what I really like here is the integration between the vocal region and the bass region, because that big bass, that foundation that I've just spent a long time talking about, is so critical to how the vocals are going to sound, because there's this warmth and this pressure feeling and this big foundation of bass. The vocals can just sit on that really, really nice. And once it's there, once that bass is there, I find that makes vocals always sound more three-dimensional, more rounded and 3D. When that bass foundation's not there, doesn't matter how clear the vocals will sound, they always sound like a bit flat and a bit 2D in space. Just my take on it. And that's where the Kef are a stark contrast. They definitely bring out the smaller details, the subtleties and nuances of the music. They make that much easier to appreciate. And they definitely sound the faster of the two. They sound more tightly focused in the vocals and across the whole soundstage, really. But the Kef's bass is exactly what I just mentioned. It's much leaner and much drier, and I find it, much more wound type. So when you're listening to vocals from the Kefs, they have that sound that I just mentioned. They have real clarity, real carved out in stone, real focus to the sound, and the nuances are just so much easier to hear. But it sounds like they're favouring that over tone and fullness and warmth. They're favouring detail over like fullness. And you might prefer one or the other. I find speakers that are favouring more tonal fullness and warmth, personally I find them more pleasing. It's more to my taste, and that type of sound pulls me back for more listening sessions. And it's a similar story for the soundstage. The SVS are not the most invisible or transparent speaker I've had in my room, far from it, but they are also far from the worst. They do give music a great sense of scale due to their bass, and if you listen to movie soundtracks, you will love that about them. Their left to right imaging is very good. And that might be due to their Dapalito, MTM, you can see it there, type of driver array. I always find that with speakers that are designed like that, they seem to image left to right really fantastically. But the SVS is what I call see-through, see through the speakers onto the music is definitely not the best I've had in this listening room. Far from it, actually. But they're pretty good in that regard. And interestingly, they went toe-to-toe with the Kef R11 Meta in that regard. And that's definitely an area where I was expecting the Kef to excel. And maybe they did excel over the SVS like a bit. And then maybe the SVS excelled in other areas kind of a bit. So it's like a pro and a con, like that, that's slightly better, that's slightly worse type of situation. So overall, I would say the Titans are about equal with the Kef in terms of their sound staging capabilities. That's very, very good. And when it comes to amplifiers, the Titans are rated with an 88 decibel sensitivity at 6 ohms. And they seemed to like some power and control to get the best results. And I think that stands to reason given the design. I used 4 different amplifiers with them, 2 Class D and 2 Class AB. And I got good results from all of them, showing that the speakers are quite forgiving, as I mentioned. Some of the amplifiers gave a cleaner, clearer sound, some better vocals, some punchier bass, some drier bass. But overall, the best result, no surprise really, came when using the best overall amplifier, the Griffin Diablo 300, because it had the most drive, but also the best control over the whole sound, but especially in the deepest bass frequencies. And I think the forgiving nature of the Titans will make them more flexible with amplifier quality to a point, which is probably going to be great for a lot of people, especially in home cinema types of environments. But what I like about them is that they will give you more if you feed them a better quality signal. They've got what I call like scalability. So that I found really impressive. But I also think if you're going to use them with lesser quality amplifiers, they're not going to rip your head off and totally punish you for doing so. So that makes them probably a little bit more flexible in that regard. When I'm saying flexible, I definitely wouldn't use these with low power tube amplifiers. Well, you could try, but I think the bass might get a bit too fat and a little bit too tubby. However, with tube amplifiers with a little bit more drive and control about them, something like the Galleon TS120 SE that I had here last year, that could work really nicely. But of course, I haven't tried it to be able to say or know exactly. Overall then, I think SVS have done an excellent job with the Ultra Evolution Titans. They are not perfect, and they are definitely a little unorthodox, and there are some things that I think probably should be better at their higher price. But if these were the compromises needed in order for there to be the shaped cabinet and all of the drivers and everything that creates this type of sound quality, I think they are compromises that many could live with, including me. And I really have had some great listening sessions with the Titans, and they are going to be staying with me, at least for the foreseeable future, because I think they're a great speaker to do comparisons with others. But I think I can sum up this whole review in really 2 short sentences. I think the Titans are a very good all-rounder speaker that's refined enough to be satisfying, even for people with high expectations. But because of the bass and their energy and their liveliness, they're also a fun speaker to listen to and a fun speaker to live with. That's got just enough of everything to keep you wanting more, to keep you, clicking on to the next track. What does that sound like? And whenever I have listening sessions like that, they're always the most enjoyable ones. And I've had a number of those with the Titans. And of course, they probably have the best name for any speakers across the whole hi-fi market, Titan. I absolutely love that name. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you have, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more.